the Vice Chancellor of PISAI, Superior General of the Society of Missionaries of Africa, Father Stanley Lubungo, the President of PISAI, Professor Wasim Salman, all invited guests, both present and online. Good evening. I'm Martin Awana Wulobai, Director of Studies here at PISAI. It is my privilege to introduce our speaker tonight, Father Moussa Serge Traore, missionary of Africa from Burkina Faso. He holds a PhD in history from the School of Oriental and African Studies, SOAS, University of London, and will soon join the Institute for Interreligious Dialogue and Islamic Studies at Tangaza University, Nairobi in Kenya, as a faculty member. I introduce Father Serge with particular joy because we share a long journey that began in 1993. Philosophy in Burkina Faso, novitiate in Tanzania, theology at Tangaza University in Nairobi, Kenya, and later our studies here in Rome. He at the Pontifical University, the Gregorian, and both of us reunited once again through Islamic studies here at PISAI. So he knows PISAI very well. He is a missionary, a scholar, and a researcher with pastoral experience in several countries, most recently in Brazil. His most recent publication appeared in 2025, The Peacemakers Working with the Pope, the President, and the Peoples of Abraham. As a member of the Committee of Historians of the Missionaries of Africa, he is particularly well placed to offer tonight's lecture entitled From Lavigerie to PISAI, the Institutional History of the Missionaries of Africa's Engagement with Islam and Islamic Studies. This lecture forms part of the series of conferences marking the centenary of the Pontifical Institute for Arabic and Islamic Studies, founded in 1926 in Tunisia. As noted on the conference poster, the lecture offers a renewed historical perspective on the missionaries of Africa and their engagement with Islam. Father Serge will trace the gradual passage from primarily missionary concerns to a more structured scholarly study of Islam and to forms of encounter that would later resonate within the wider Catholic Church's reorientation in Nostra Aetate. Father Serge, the floor is now yours. Welcome.
Good evening. Thank you very much for inviting me to this series of conferences. And I would like to start with a moment of silence to pay homage to my predecessors. I mean, the missionaries of Africa who died in the mission among the Muslims. And I think they are very important. We know that the first caravan who was trying to go to Timbuktu, they left Ouargla in December 1875, and we received the news of their death. So this year, 2026, we remember that 150 years ago, Pommier, Bouchon, Menoret, young missionaries of Africa, gave their life for the mission among the Muslims. And we also remember Jean, Christian, Charles, Alain, our blessed martyrs in Algeria. So let us pay homage to them with a moment of silence. Thank you. The history of the Missionaries of Africa engagement with Islam has often been told through figures, missionary scholars, public theological developments, and talking about Cardinal Charles Lavigerie's North African vision, the presence of the missionaries of Africa in Islamic societies. We all know people like Caspar, Beaumont, Renault, Lagarde. So we have already a kind of knowledge of the missionaries of Africa engagement with Islam. But what I'm trying to do today is to give you an institutional history. So I am going to look at the institution of the missionaries of Africa and the commitment, the engagement that the missionaries of Africa as an institution, not as individual scholars of Islam, but as an institution has promoted within the Catholic Church and also in the world. So I think that focusing on individual scholars is also good, but such approaches can leave in the background the institutional process through which a missionary institution has created in this world a durable scholarly, pastoral, and ecclesial tradition of mission among the Muslims. So what I decided to do is to write an institutional history from the minutes of the leadership of the General Council of the Missionaries of Africa, which is something very rare that we use them because they are not made public to all historians. But I thank the leaders of the Missionaries of Africa for the trust. But I think it's important. Of course, I'm not going to reveal the latest meetings of the Missionaries of Africa, of the leadership, because it's not available even to us, Missionaries of Africa. So what is very important is to see how they navigated, the leaders of the Missionaries of Africa navigated in that question of Catholic mission among the Muslims in Africa and also in Europe, as I shall explain. My central discovery, or if you want, my central argument, is that the missionaries of Africa engagement with Islam was neither a simple continuation of Lavigerie's founding vision, nor the cumulative effect of individual scholarly initiatives. It is an institutional history, which means the leaders of the missionaries of Africa function as mediators between the founding charism of Cardinal Lavigerie and changing circumstances. And this is very important. They had to navigate between the changing circumstances and the conditions and situations, and between North African origins of the Society of the Missionaries of Africa and sub-Saharan context and expansion, between missionary zeal and academic discipline of Islam, between apologetic literature by some missionaries of Africa, and dialogical formation between a congregational work and an ecclesial service. And this institutional approach is especially important for understanding PISAI, I believe. The Institute did not emerge from an isolated academic project. No, Its roots lie in decades of leadership decisions, discernment concerning Muslim societies, Arabic studies, Islamic publications, formation for mission, and the need for trained personnel. And this is what I could see in all the minutes of the General Council, the leadership of the society, how, in fact, PISAI became a site where the society negotiated major questions. How could academic rigor about Islam serve pastoral encounter? Could a single missionary society sustain a pontifical institute financially and intellectually? How should historically North African expertise in Islam respond to Islam in south of the Sahara in Africa, and also Islam in Europe, and also in Asia? So, as all academic paper, we need to see what has been written already about the subject of the Missionaries of Africa engagement with Islam. And there is a literature about it, and people have been very much concerned, and they have studied the Missionaries of Africa commitment and mission among the Muslims, especially in Algeria and also in Europe. So the existing scholarship on the Missionaries of Africa and their engagement with Islam is quite extensive, but it is fragmented, spanning in internal missionary writings. We ourselves, as Missionaries of Africa, we have written about it, and also external writings, scholarship. From the Missionaries of Africa, the first attempt to give a meaning or an academic aspect to our mission is the book of Jules Cussac. He wrote Sahara, le pays et la mission in 1941. And this book represents one of the first attempts to situate missionary activity within its geographical and cultural environment. And the work laid the groundwork for later historical and analytical studies. Then Jean-Marie Godel penned a very interesting work entitled Évolution de la mission des Pères Blancs en terre d'Islam, which is quite an interesting because he writes a kind of history of the approaches of the missionaries of Africa in the mission among the Muslims. It's a historical overview of missionary approaches from 1870 to 1980. Then a document of the Missionaries of Africa called Notre Identité was published in 1982. And this document was produced following the general chapter of 1980. And it marks a significant institutional reflection. It examines the defining elements of the society, showing each time a kind of historical overview, the present situation, and the future perspectives. And the document states that l'opinion publique dans l'Église associe les Pères Blancs à l'apostolat auprès des musulmans. Public opinion within the church associates the missionaries of Africa with mission among the Muslims. So, an interesting document. The second bulk of scholarship really is done also by Missionaries of Africa, and the book of Joseph Kirk, Lavigerie, les Pères Blancs et les Musulmans Maghrébins, is quite an interesting book because it shows, as you know, Joseph Kirk was a scholar, so he tried to really give a kind of scholarly account of the work and the approaches of the missionaries of Africa among the Muslims, but he focused on the Maghreb, so Algeria and Tunisia. And this work was, in fact, ordered by the Superior General Robert Gay, who asked him to work on a serious study of our mission among the Muslims. So he said something very interesting. The experience of the missionaries of Africa in the African Muslim milieu is unique. Few societies and congregations have devoted as many members, as much time, and as much reflection to it. These roughly 120 years of Christian presence in a Muslim context bring together a significant body of pastoral reflection, and we must not allow to be covered by the dust of oblivion. On the contrary, we should keep the memory of our predecessors very much alive in order to reflect on their experiences, to examine them. So finally, last very interesting work that has been written, and this is not by the Missionaries of Africa, but by other scholars. There are many scholars who have written about the Missionaries of Africa's mission among the Muslims in Africa. But I would like to single out the latest publication that came out last year. It is written by an American historian called Joseph Peterson. And Peterson wrote a book called Sacred Rivals: Catholic Missions and the Making of Islam in 19th Century France and Algeria. And in his book, he studied really the missionaries, the Catholic missionaries, the Jesuits, Lavigerie, and the missionaries of Africa, how they played a crucial role in defining Islam as a coherent religious system. He said that before them, Islam, especially in Europe and in France, was like a set of local practices and prayers. And the missionaries, the Catholic missionaries, Jesuits, Lavigerie, and the missionaries of Africa increasingly treated Islam really as a world religion, a sacred rival to Christianity, which is interesting because his thesis is that by fighting, that's what he used as a term, by fighting Islam, we finally gave to Islam a kind of new system, a kind of a new character, that Islam is a religion like a Christianity. It's a rival religion. So now this is an overview quickly. What I want to do now is to see how the Missionaries of Africa as an institution have really shaped the knowledge of Islam and mission among the Muslims. So I propose a comprehensive institutional history focusing on internal decision-making processes of the Missionaries of Africa. The first point is that our mission among the Muslims in Algeria started with actions. We started by welcoming orphans, Muslim orphans. We started by taking care of them. Some of them were baptized, yes, but not all of them were baptized. This showed clearly that we didn't have a clear mandate to baptize all the Muslims, but some of them we recognize were baptized. And the second action, the second element, which is foundational really to our experience as missionaries of Africa, is our first living among the Muslims. It happens in 1872 when we moved from Alger. Paulmier, Charmetan, and Brother Falcon moved to live among the people in the Sahara. We started in La Guat, and then from La Guat, we started visiting all the region of the Mzab and Metlili. And so we started a mission really in 1872 among the Muslims. And the first thing that comes out clearly in our diaries and records about that mission is the word friendship. We established friendship with them. They welcome us, hospitality. We were really amazed by this capacity that the people of the Sahara were welcoming us and giving their friendship. Then from there, we will develop the whole a mission among the Muslims. So the earliest reference now in the leadership meeting, the earliest references to Islam reveal, in fact, that the society engagement with the Muslims was framed primarily in spiritual and missionary terms. We never spoke really about Islam as a subject of studies. In 1876, the leaders discussed the prayer to Our Lady of Africa. And in that prayer, there was an intention for the conversion of the Muslims. Then, what they decided to do, they wished that this prayer be recited in all houses, asking for new missionaries for that work of mission among the Muslims, and of course, conversion of these people. In December of that year, 1876, the same year, the leadership returned to the same theme, urging that all missionary communities be united in this spirit of prayer, and that benefactors of Christian mothers be encouraged to participate in the mission among the Muslims as a spiritual mission. And this is very important. This early material is important for two reasons. First, it confirms that Muslims were not peripheral to the society's self-understanding. If we had a prayer, and in our prayer, we do not only ask for the evangelization of the world, for the evangelization of people, but we ask the grace to be missionaries to the Muslims, it means that the Muslims are not peripheral. It's not an occasion, it's not a condition, it is part of our identity as missionaries of Africa. And this is very important, and this is what the leadership has tried to express by having a prayer that should be recited, prayed by all the communities. And they even ask that indulgences may be associated with that prayer. Understand that the question of conversion is not really the question, the most important thing here. What is important is how an institution understands itself by its relations with the Muslims. And this is the most important element of the leadership of the missionaries of Africa at that time. So, the society's engagement with Islam began, therefore, not as an academic project, but as one actions of love, of care for Muslims orphans. Secondly, friendship with them. And third, prayer, institutionalized spiritual orientation. Now, something happened in 1887, which I think very important. It illustrates the realism of the leadership of the missionaries of Africa. The military chaplaincy of Kairouan in Tunisia was surprised. So the French soldiers had to leave Kairouan. Then the question arose, shall we leave also missionaries of Africa because the French soldiers have left? The question was discussed by the leaders. Kairouan was described in the minutes as the holy city of Tunisian Muslims, and it carried symbolic weight. Withdrawal may be interpreted by the Arabs as a retreat. Yet, the General Council at that time, the leaders of the society, judged that the mission in Kairouan was impossible. Why? Because it was a matter of realism. The society had limited personnel and finances. So this is very important to understand that this decision is revealing. The leadership was not guided only by zeal or symbolism. It weighed political conditions, personnel shortages, financial constraints, and missionary feasibility. Therefore, already in the 19th century, the society's engagement with Muslims was shaped by institutional jurisprudence. The leaders did not simply execute a fixed founding missionary program. They interpreted the charism in light of circumstances. Now, from that time, we move to the 1920s. With the emergence of a new object of study, Islam was no more Muslims, because in all the documents before the 20s, we were talking about Muslims. We never used the term as such of Islam. But in the 20s, now the leaders of the Missionaries of Africa started using the term Islam as a new object of study. The word Islam appears for the first time as in an official document as a topic of discussion of the leaders of the Missionaries of Africa in the meeting of the 17th of May, 1926. Before that, the leaders spoke primarily of Muslims. The shift is more than linguistic. It signals a transition from a primary pastoral and missionary concern with persons and populations to a more structured attention to Islam as a religious, intellectual, and social system requiring study. The leaders already authorized scholarly initiatives related to Islamic text. In 1905, for example, Father Vela was authorized to print his translation work on the Islamic theory of abrogation. The leadership considered the work useful for missionaries living among Muslims. This episode shows an intermediate stage. Islamic knowledge was valued, but primarily as an aid to missionary work. The scholarly study of Islam had not yet become an autonomous institutional priority. The decisive turning point came in 1926 with the establishment of a House of Islamic Studies, whose creation had been approved by the General Chapter. And we know that house, which became IBLA, and later on there will be another house, La Manuba, who will be our PISAI today. But something happened at that time. We, the leaders, were thinking about Tunis for that house of study. But then came a letter asking us to go to Cairo to base our institute in Cairo. And the leaders were really interested in that possibility of Cairo. On the 7th of June, the leaders considered the location when an opportunity arose in Cairo. They recognized that Cairo has a more important center for Islamic studies than Tunis. It was because of the great university, Al-Azhar, which was considered as the greatest university, a city of Islam. Cairo was a city of Islam, frequented by students of many nations. Yet there were some complications concerning the Melkite College, where we were supposed to be. That led the leaders on the 29th of July to abandon the Cairo option and return to our original decision to establish the house in Tunis. Later on, the discernment shows that it was better to be in Tunis because of the whole development of our mission. Cairo would have been a new experience, but maybe it would have been an experience purely academic, while in Tunis, we could keep the academic and the pastoral and missionary approach. So these decisions are foundational for the history of PISAI. The House of Islamic Studies was not born from a simple inspiration, but from deliberation, comparison, negotiation, and financial commitment. The leaders of the Missionaries of Africa weighed Tunis, Cairo, the place to put that important study house of Islam, not only as missionary fields, but as intellectual environments. It considered universities, languages, cost, buildings, personnel, and institutional risk also. So the future PISAI thus had its origin in a concrete administrative process through which the Society of the Missionaries of Africa recognized that engagement with Islam required specialized formation, but also institutional infrastructure. Then, after 1926, what appeared is an institutionalization of Islamic studies. It became the things now, Islamic studies. The leadership assigned personnel, provided budgets, approved books and professors, and clarified the community structures. In 1927, the Institute of Islamic Studies was installed within an existing house. Now, something very important happened in that time. How to organize that house of teaching? There was, in fact, two superiors. And this is very funny. In the same house, two superiors. One was in charge of the academic program, and the other one was in charge of the house, because the leaders wanted something very important. They were very keen to something. The house should be at once a religious community, a missionary-based community, and a scholarly center. So the leadership did not conceive Islamic studies as purely bookish. Study was to be linked with contact, visits, relations, and linguistic immersion. The academic and pastoral were intertwined from the beginning. And this is why the Cairo possibility would not have helped us from the beginning. And the pattern is significant. The leadership of the Missionaries of Africa encouraged Islamic studies, but feared polemical excesses sometimes. It valued knowledge of Islam, yet sought to control public discourse. The institutionalization of Islamic studies thus involved not only founding houses and appointing scholars, but also regulating the tone, audience, and implications of our discourses and studies and publications. The leadership's concern anticipated later Catholic sensitivities regarding respectful language, dialogue, and the avoidance of unnecessary controversy. Then came a very important question. I call it the Foca question. Some of you maybe know Roberto Foca. Father Roberto Foca offers a revealing case study of the leadership of the Missionaries of Africa and how they shaped our engagement with Islam. Father Foca was involved in the early Islamic Studies project. He was the first superior of IBLA, and he was a scholar, and he produced works on Islam. Yet his initiatives provoked concern. Father Roberto Foca disagreed with the official method of the Missionaries of Africa mission among the Muslims. Let me summarize that mission, that method. The method of the Missionaries of Africa has been crafted by Henri Marshall. And Henri Marshall was a superior of the mission in Algeria. And he was elected Assistant General in 1912. And Marshall was quite an impressive person. By the way, he remained Assistant General for 35 years. He was Assistant General of the Missionaries of Africa. And he developed a method of mission among people of other religions, especially Islam. Phase one, it is the initial phase. Make yourself loved, accepted by people. Second phase, expound now essential truths. Don't enter in Christian truths. Start with what he calls les vérités essentielles, essential truths, which means mercy, forgiveness, repentance, for the conversion of heart. Help even Muslims to become better Muslims at that stage. How do you do that? Home visits, spontaneous dialogue, conversations. Then phase 3, he calls it the postulate. Welcome those Muslims who are interested in Christianity. But then don't be in a hurry to teach them the Christian truths. Start by testing their inner motivations and dispositions. Why do they want to become Christians? Only then you move to phase 4. And in phase 4, this is called le catechumena, the catechumenate. Now teach them the Christian truths. Present now Jesus Christ. Father Roberto Foucault disagreed. For him, phase 1, 2, 3 can be done in one day. And we move to phase 4. Present the truth, the Christian truth to them. Don't waste time. He's not against the method as such, but he finds that phase 1, 2, 3 are a waste of time. Because the way Marshall presented it, it was given too much time to that phase. And he said, no, what is important is that we are apostles. We have to preach the gospel of Jesus Christ to those people. And Foucault, from his experience, he said that those we are interested in should be the les musulmans lettrés, and the educated and learned Muslims. So after 1, 2, 3, just tell them the revealed truth of Jesus Christ and how the revealed truth destroy their truth. You have to convince them of the truth of Jesus Christ. His aim was to lead them to question the foundation of the faith, thus emphasizing what was known as phase 4 in the method. So he said that we shouldn't spend excessive time in the earlier stages. So Foucault entered in a kind of opposition to Marshall, but very interestingly, he has never been condemned by the leadership. The General Council did not condemn him, despite his criticism of Marshall's method, even though Henri Marshall himself was a member of the council. On the contrary, in 1926, the General Council, of which Marshall was part, appointed Foucault as founding superior of IBLA, recognizing his scholarship, what they called une érudition indiscutable, but a wrong method. So the leaders kept a close watch at his public activities and writings. But this case is quite an interesting, because although the leadership officially adopted Marshall's method, it never entirely prevented individual missionaries from pursuing efforts aimed at the conversion of Muslims. Missionaries who did not adhere to the official institutional approach were generally not given responsibility in the Society of the Missionaries of Africa, but they were allowed to continue the missionary work. So the leadership handling of Foucault illustrate the difference between individual expertise and institutional mission. This is my point here. A missionary could be knowledgeable, energetic, and extremely recognized as expert, yet still be judged and suitable for a particular institutional role. What I find quite amazing is how the leadership of the Missionaries of Africa kept a line of mission, a policy of mission, the method of mission, while the missionaries of Africa themselves, some of them were criticizing, but we never abandoned that line of a mission among the Muslims with great respect and gradually evangelizing them. We never refused to baptize, but our method was always to be one among them. Then we come to the time of the Second Vatican Council, which is well known. I'm not going to dwell a lot on that. What is important to know from the leadership of the Missionaries of Africa is that the leadership insisted that all our formations should be oriented towards Islam, like the Scholasticate of Carthage. They decided that all the candidates, the students, should have a basic knowledge of Islam and its expansion in Africa. And the same year for the Vatican Council, especially in 1958, before the Vatican Council, the leaders of the Society of the Missionaries of Africa subscribed to the Encyclopedia of Islam for the Generalate Library, which is quite an interesting move that they decided in a meeting. Since Islam is so important to us, we are going to subscribe to the Encyclopedia of Islam. I don't know how many members of the General Council at that time read even the Encyclopedia of Islam, but it's a very important decision to have it in our house, the Encyclopedia of Islam. It's a very small thing, but it expresses a whole commitment to Islamic knowledge. Then in 1961, the Sacred Congregation for the Oriental Church approached the Missionaries of Africa regarding the creation of a section concerned with missionary activities in territories of strong Muslim influence. The congregation asked whether the Superior General agreed that such a section should be created and whether the Society of the Missionaries of Africa could provide a missionary of Africa expert in Islamic questions to organize and direct it. They could have asked this to the Jesuits. They could have asked this to other congregations, the Franciscans, who have also an experience of mission among the Muslims. But they asked the Missionaries of Africa. The leadership discussed the matter carefully, noting the need to inform first the propaganda fide, because it was coming, the appeal was coming from the congregation of the Oriental Church. And this is the most important, the importance of applying such studies to all territories affected by Islam. And they expressed to the congregation of Oriental Church that their desire is that any missionary of Africa proposed to that congregation for that work should place at the service of the whole church, not his personal ideas, but, and this is very beautiful, the experience of the Society of the Missionaries of Africa. It is the whole experience of the Society of the Missionaries of Africa that we desire to see in the Roman congregation, but not just one expert. And this was clearly expressed to the Vatican. We don't want an expert, the Missionaries of Africa, to be there as an individual expert with his own personal ideas, but we want the whole experience, the whole tradition of the Missionaries of Africa, mission among the Muslims, to be there in the Roman congregation. And I think this episode is central for me to my argument that The Roman authority recognized the missionaries of Africa as holders of a precious collective experience in relation to Islam. Not individual scholars, but a precious collective experience in relation to Islam. The leaders make explicit that expertise in Islam had become part of the society's corporate identity. It is not individual identity, but it is a society's corporate identity. Then from the Second Vatican Council, we created the section for Islam. And that's the general chapter of 67 and the subsequent council meetings marked the creation of a more systematic structure for coordinating the society's work with Muslims. The minutes speak of la vocation islamique de la Société des Missionnaires d'Afrique, an Islamic vocation, and insist that it must be, and this is the newness, de-Maghrebized. Because it has been too much centered in North Africa. So now is the time to de-Maghrebize our experience of Islam. Islam was not only a North African issue, but an apostolic issue for the whole of Africa, and therefore for the whole of the society. And this was a major conceptual shift. It recognized that the growth of Islam in sub-Saharan Africa, and also it criticized the approach in North Africa as a general approach for the whole of the Society of the Missionaries of Africa. So the proposed Secretariat for Muslims that was established within the Society of the Missionaries of Africa had this responsibility and mission to offer technical help and documentation, coordination, and reflection, and to find within the society different approaches to Islam according to different circumstances. The significance of this development cannot be overstated. The Society of the Missionaries of Africa moved from having Islamic specialists to creating a structure for coordinating knowledge, personal information, and pastoral reflection. And the newness from the Second Vatican Council will be Islam in the south of the Sahara, which is becoming more and more important. From the late 60s onward, the leadership focused on sub-Saharan Africa. Tanzania became a major test case. The leaders discussed an Islam team composed of Father Jean-Marie Godel, Peter Smith. There will be missionaries in Tanzania, but they were called an Islam team. And this is quite an interesting, because their mission was only for helping the local church to have a clear, coordinated, efficient mission among the Muslims and towards the Muslim. The leadership in 67 noted that many missionaries of Africa in Islamized areas of sub-Saharan Africa feared that the apostolate in their regions will be treated according to the same principles in North Africa. So the leaders have to discuss it. And they decided that there is no established one-for-all method. The method depends on the circumstances, on the places. But there is one thing that we cannot negotiate, which is coming from our founder, is the adaptation to the circumstances, adaptation to the local circumstances. Now, from that time, the most revealing elements about the leaders' observation about Islam in sub-Saharan Africa is that all missionary of Africa reflection on apostolate in Islamic milieu had taken place, is true, in North Africa, but it is important now that this knowledge of the North African mission should help in shaping the knowledge, the mission among the Muslims in south of the Sahara. And this is a very decisive shift. The society began to move from a Maghrebi model of Islam towards a plural understanding of Muslim context. This contextualization of our missionary approach is faithfulness to Cardinal Lavigerie's approach. PISAI, if it was to remain relevant at that time, had to serve this broader horizon. And this development marks a profound transformation in the society's role. The missionaries of Africa no longer saw themselves only as direct missionaries to Muslims. No, increasingly, they became formators, consultants, resource persons, mediators for local churches. PISAI and the Islam section, based at the Generalate, served this wider ecclesial mission by preparing people, producing documentation, offering sessions, connecting local concerns to broader Catholic expertise. And this shift marks a transition from a regional specialization to a continental and global understanding of Islam. And another very important element will be the 80s. Now, the 80s, something very serious will happen, because in the 80s, we realized that the missionaries of Africa realized that Islam was now everywhere, even in Europe. With the phenomenon of migration, there was a kind of globalization of the Muslim apostolate. And we decided to have a mission among the Muslims also in Europe. And in all this, PISAI became like the center of production of knowledge that will help us now to have an effective mission among the Muslims in Europe. In 1982, the Council surveyed the missionaries' European involvement in detail. We had centers in Germany, El Kalima in Belgium, Amana in Paris, individual initiatives in Marseille, Lyon, Toulouse, Lille, and Paris, work in Holland, Spain, Great Britain, and publications such as Se Comprendre, Encuentro, Encounter, Begrib, Sibedo, Homme et Migration, and Islam Westlicht Welt. So we developed so many initiatives to be present to the Muslims in Europe that the leaderships allowed this, but they needed to coordinate all those initiatives. The minutes of the General Council show a great discernment that happened among them about our missions towards the Muslims in Europe. They foster all the initiatives, but with a lot of caution, with a lot of wisdom, I will say, because they were interested in how efficient those initiatives are. They are not only to give bread or to take care of migrants. There is a whole mission among the Muslims in Europe. So in the 80s, the leaders repeatedly started discussing the lack of specialists, a specialist in Islam, to cater for those missions in Europe. And for PISAI, the 80s was also important because the leaders repeatedly discussed the lack of specialists, even for PISAI also, the difficulty of preparing young confreres, missionaries of Africa, to be expert in Islam, because we had so many initiatives going on in the world, line of our mission towards the Muslims, that finally we didn't have personnel even for PISAI. We didn't have people who can be prepared as lecturers in PISAI. So for PISAI, the 80s was important moment of discernment, of institutional discernment. And at that time, the president of PISAI had to remind the leadership of the missionaries of Africa of the importance of having personnel also for PISAI, and not only having personnel for the different missions. The problem of professors becoming disconnected also from the field of experience was one of the topic of the meetings. The most striking development in the 80s is the growing concern over the financial sustainability of PISAI. From the 80s, the leadership of the Missionaries of Africa became very worried about the future of PISAI. The leadership repeatedly discussed deficits, fundraising efforts, and the burden placed on the Society of the Missionaries of Africa. In 1984, the Institute leadership expressed, the PISAI's leadership expressed concern over the lack of finances. In 1985, the leadership explicitly acknowledged that maintaining a university-level institution required commitment and financial commitment. This led to a recurrent proposal of creating a consortium of religious congregations to share responsibility for the institute finances, staffing, and academic program. But this was painful also for us, because we could feel that we are losing such an important institute, which is an institutional history for us. But thanks be to God, we didn't lose it. The council insisted, the leaders insisted that such a step of a kind of a consortium for PISAI will also strengthen the institute's ecclesial legitimacy. But the stakes were clearly articulated. Without a broader ecclesial support, the long-term existence of PISAI could be jeopardized. So the 80s were really, from the minutes of the General Council, the big concern was the sustainability of PISAI, not the sustainability of our mission among the Muslims, but the sustainability of such an important center of production of knowledge that will help us be more efficient in our mission. While we started looking for financial sustainability, we continue to insist on the missionary vocation of PISAI, that it shouldn't be only an academic center of production of knowledge, but it should be also an institution that formed, trained, empowered missionaries in their apostolic mission among the Muslims. And this has been not an individual work, but it has been the work of the leadership of the Society, the Missionaries of Africa, to maintain this. This is central to my argument and my research, that the history of Catholic Islamic studies, especially of PISAI, was not only a history of individuals or a history of ideas, it was also a history of an institution, the Missionaries of Africa. It is a history of budgets, of buildings, of foundations, of institutional alliances, and the search for ecclesial ownership. To conclude, in the 1989, the leaders of the Missionaries of Africa had a very important discernment about our mission among the Muslims and also about the future of PISAI. And it was in the 6th of October, 1989, it was one of the clearest moments of institutional self-consciousness regarding Islam. The leaders held an extended exchange on Islam as one of the major points for our action in the coming years, for the future. There was no formal decisions, but the discussion reveals a remarkable level of leadership from the leaders of the Missionaries of Africa, and a level of strategic concern. The leaders agreed that the society had something very important to do in relation to Islam, and that Islam was a reality of capital importance in Africa, perhaps even more so in the future. And the leaders of the Missionaries of Africa described this as a special responsibility of the whole society and the leaders. And for that, they continue to promote PISAI. But then in the 1990s, Cardinal Tonko will call the leaders, and make a very important point. What happened? The leaders meeting with Cardinal Tonko on the 16th of June, 1990, is very significant. The Superior General described PISAI as an important tool for the church, arguing that people had to be trained who knew Islam from the inside in order to encounter Muslims. He appealed for collaboration from other congregations so that the work of PISAI could continue. Cardinal Tonko shared a criticism that PISAI's courses were said to be too academic, not sufficiently pastoral, and not sufficiently preparatory for encounter with Islam. And the leaders had to respond that it is not true, that we have already a pastoral program, but we need to keep the academic production of knowledge about Islam and the pastoral approach, the pastoral training. So the Superior General replied that PISAI had begun a one-year pastoral course for students who came not from Arab countries, but from sub-Saharan Africa. And he insisted that from our origins, the Society of the Missionaries of Africa remained committed to mission among the Muslims and to the production of knowledge about Islam. So there was a tension in the 90s, but the leadership of that time managed brilliantly to convince the church that PISAI is so important for the church, and we express clearly as Missionaries of Africa our commitment to PISAI. I conclude by saying that the history reconstructed from the leadership of the Missionaries of Africa cannot be simplified as a kind of linear movement from conversion to dialogue. No. the societies of the missionaries of Africa, since its origin, has always promoted Islamic studies and mission among Muslims. Conversion, dialogue is not a real issue. The real issue is a mission, a Christian mission among the Muslims, and a clear, precise knowledge of Islam. The better interpretation that I would like to conclude from this historical survey is that the PISAI is the fruit of a transformation through institutional discernment. From Muslims as recipients of missionary effort to Islam as a religious tradition to be studied. From Muslims as a recipient of missionary activities to Muslim societies as context requiring linguistic and cultural immersion, to Muslim-Christian relations as a field of study, but above all, as a field of life. The vocabulary changed, but what remained is our deep commitment and love for the Muslims. Thank you.
Thank you, Father Serge. This is the time for questions, and then if there are some clarifications too, you're welcome. But please keep your questions brief. We'll take the first round of questions, then you will give your response. Thank you. Here's a question.
Thank you very much, Father Serge, for the presentation, so engaging, especially to see how the missionaries of Africa has taken this duty. And as PISAI too celebrates the 100 years, as you were presenting, I was curiously caught by the dates that you are presenting, especially when you talked about the first time Islam became the object of study was in that meeting of the 17th of May, 1926. So just exactly 100 years, just some few days ago. Firstly, you mentioned also about Cairo and Al-Hassar. That very time, on the 13th to 19th of May, 1926, there was the Caliphate Conference in Cairo, Al-Azhar, which some would say it ended 19th, but others would say 22nd, which could be tomorrow, will be 100 years. So there is also that reality that had happened at that time. I didn't hear as you went through, maybe you didn't find anything there. But also I think from that time, the Islam in itself also changed, apart from being Muslims, but also not having that one leader as Caliph and the going on about it. So to me, that curiosity really touched me. You may not need to answer that, but it was a curiosity for me, the dates especially, that within that period when the missionaries of Africa leadership was meeting, also the leadership of Muslims were meeting in Cairo in that conference, which is called Caliphate Conference, to discuss what had happened 2 years. That means the abolishment of the Caliphate by Kemal Atatürk.
Okay. It's not really an answer. I was also impressed by the 20s. And when I say Islam as a kind of the first time Islam, the word appeared as a subject of study, it is from the leader's perspective, because even before, somebody like Father Vela was working already on the theory of abrogation. So Islam was already used among the missionaries of Africa, but as leaders coming together and saying, now is the time for us to formalize really the whole study of Islam, because we have scholars scattered, but now we want a kind of study of Islam as a subject, of a science. This happened really in that meeting of 26. Your observation is perfect, and I think it was really the time of change and within Islam in Africa. Usman Kane, the Senegalese, has written 2 books about the Muslims' the African Muslims' understanding. One book, Beyond Timbuktu, which is an intellectual history of African Muslims, which is a very beautiful summary of that. And I think he pointed out also to that change, how it happens, and it affected really Muslims, African Muslims' self-understanding, and how they also crafted or invented a kind of understanding of African Islam. I mean, it's a whole discussion, but it's a very good observation. Thank you for that.
Question for you. In what ways did the missionaries of Africa's approach to dialogue differ from Cardinal Lavigerie's personal ideas on mission?
This is a very interesting question. The debate between Henri Marshall and Roberto Foucault, both of them appealed to Cardinal Lavigerie. Both of them said, I am faithful to Cardinal Lavigerie. Marshall said, the method in 4 phases is faithful to Cardinal Lavigerie. And Foucault said, my method also of going straight to phase 4 is faithful to Cardinal Lavigerie. I think if there is something that can describe Cardinal Lavigerie, is adaptation. Cardinal Lavigerie, I disagree a bit with Diego in his article about the ambiguous legacy of Lavigerie, and also Bellman's also penned an article in 94. He was talking also about Cardinal Lavigerie approach, and the 2 articles of Bellman's in 94 and Diego in 2020. They also reflected on Cardinal Lavigerie's approach. My personal intake about that is this. I think we have to understand that Lavigerie is above all a pastor. He is clearly an apostle. He will say, I am an apostle, and only that. I want to preach the gospel to people. Now the approach depends. And this is where adaptation becomes the key word for him. If you have, he said it clearly, if you had even to keep quiet and not say anything, keep it. But it's just a method. It doesn't mean it is the aim. It is only a means for you to evangelize. But you can never compromise the evangelization, but it's just about the means. So what I think personally is that the leadership of the missionaries of Africa, through my reading of an institutional history, has been very faithful to Cardinal Lavigerie's spirit, I would say. Cardinal Lavigerie doesn't say, convert them, do not convert them. His method or methodology of evangelization is an adaptation to the situations. And this is where the leadership coming together has to discern, what do we do in that particular circumstance? And this is what they have been doing. And even when they have to leave a place like Kairouan, which was so important to be at the center, the heart of the Tunisian Islam, they decided, because it's about the mission and the adaptation to the situation. It's all about discernment. It's not about imposing a pre-established program of evangelization. This is where the method of proposed by Henri Marshall is very interesting, because the first phase is the famous inculturation, entering in the culture of people, being one with the people. And from there, you will find the right way to share your faith with them. So I think, if I hope I have answered to your question, the leadership of the Missionaries of Africa have to be commended for that. They have been very faithful to Cardinal Lavigerie's vision by always putting the founding carries in particular circumstances through a process of discernment.
Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to ask my question in French because I'm beginner in English. Je vous remercie pour cette conférence qui éclaire d'un jour nouveau les origines de notre institut. Aujourd'hui, face aux défis contemporains du dialogue et de la rencontre, comment cette histoire interne des missionnaires d'Afrique peut-elle inspirer notre posture pastorale?
In English or in French now? The answer. This internal history, this institutional history shows something very important that I single out. I said, it's not just about being expert in Islam. It's not just about being knowledgeable. There is a kind of institutional character to our mission among the Muslims. And this is very important because as historians, sometimes we tend to forget that part, and we are more interested in who did what at what time, at each time. It's interesting to focus on what people have done and what scholars have contributed to the world, but we should not forget that mission among the Muslims have to be an institutional mission, ecclesial mission. It's not so much about having a permission to do it or not to do it. It's not really about I need a permission, but it has to be an ecclesial movement. It has to be an ecclesial mission. If not, it remains a kind of a Robinson Crusoe thing, I mean, an adventure, a personal adventure. I'm not saying that we cannot disagree with the institution. The way we have seen in the Roberto Foca question is that the leadership didn't condemn Foca. They tried to put together, Marshall and Foca, the method. How can we together work as an institution for the mission? So I will say for us today, knowledge is always at the service of mission for us as missionaries of Africa. The production of knowledge is always destined to something. And for us, it's destined to our mission because this is why we have been consecrated for. So we need to go back all the time to the institutional history behind our mission or supporting our mission. I would say this is what I personally gain from reading all these reports and going through the history of PISAI, through the leadership discernment. At a certain point, you could feel how tired they were even in discussing buildings and foundings. You know, the whole discussion about Saint Apollinary and Saint Callisto. There was a whole discussion at one point. The the Opus Dei wanted to use this building, and we have to use a lot of politics and discussion. So all this is important and it's good. It's just that we need, I would say in one word to answer you, we need to avoid this one-man show mission because it is beautiful. You will be as expert, you will be appreciated, but as now I'm speaking from my identity as a missionary. I don't seek a personal gain. I seek the gain of the church.
Thank you very much, Father, for the enriching lecture. And belonging to our religious congregation, I am really in awe and admiration with regard to the work that the missionaries of Africa have done. I don't even know if my congregation will ever reach a level when it comes to dialogue. I think it would be incomparable. But my question is a bit related to the other question. It's just a simple question. I don't know if you like to answer or not. Of course, 100 years means we go back to the history, we study what has been. Now, looking forward to the next 100 years, maybe. That means we need to do some self-introspection. No, we have to look at ourselves. We are used to maybe looking at the good things, but now in the future, no, what do you think could still be done to PISAI in case there's still something to be done? If you're satisfied, then I think that you can say there's nothing more to do. No? But it depends on you. No, I do not like to put it a negative like what's lacking or what, but maybe is there still something that we could do to improve? Because I think that's part of growth. Thank you.
My first reaction would be, I would like to be a student at PISAI, if it is possible. I dreamed when I was young to be a student here. And when I came after Cairo, I came to study with Martin. We were together and I ran away because Arabic was so difficult. No, in fact, it's not true. The truth is that I had already enrolled for a master program at the Gregorian. But I loved so much PISAI because the experience in Cairo was so good that after 1 year at the Gregorian, I said, let me combine the master, the Gregorian, and PISAI. That was killing. I couldn't. But this is only I would like to start with a personal experience because I strongly believe that an institution like PISAI is not important, it is essential. It is essential because our mission, the future of mission, if the future of mission is inter gentes, not ad gentes, going towards people and telling them how they should live and what they should believe. But if the future of mission is inter gentes, being one among them and sharing the light we have within, what we call the revealed truths. But the revealed truths are not dogmas, they are lights. The lights within us that should radiate and come out of us. If really the future of mission is inter gentes, an institution like PISAI really not only give you the knowledge, but it gives you, it transformed you to be able to live among people of different faith. I'm not going to put only Islam because I don't think that it's just about academic knowledge of Islam. It's a whole process of how to live among people who do not share your faith. Then you need knowledge, sure, But if you look at very well, and this I really want to commend all the teachers, the lecturers of PISAI I have known, they were not only experts, academic experts, they were people who embodied the knowledge. And this is something I find very beautiful in this place, but this may be personal. Yeah? But I really feel that when you talk to some of the lecturers I have known and I have been in contact with, even my brother here, I think he looks like a Sufi. But this embodied knowledge that makes me capable of living among people of different religions without fear of losing my faith, without fear of them, but being able to relate with them and allow God to work. If this is the future of mission and of the Catholic Church in this world, because I believe that this is the future of the church that has been designed by the Second Vatican Council beyond all the words and discussion and theological discussion and philosophical underground. There's one thing that church, the church that emerged from the Vatican Council is the church in the world, in relation with people who do not share our faith. In that sense, I think that PISAI is a very, very important center of transformation of the person, of the Christian. It could be also the Muslim, but it gives you that capacity to be a missionary inter gentes, with the people. PISAI does not make you a missionary ad Muslimus. I don't know if my Latin is correct. No, I don't think so. I've never felt it. I spent 2 years, 1 year in Cairo, 1 year here. I have always really appreciated that I will call in one word, embodied knowledge, which is important. So I think this is the future of our church and is the future of a mission, of Catholic mission, unless it becomes an intergentes mission, it will never be efficient. And this is what I think also from my reading of the institutional history of the Missionaries of Africa. The leadership have tried to stress that we do not need people who are disincarnated, who has only bookish knowledge of Islam. But even the way you study Islam here in this institution, again, this is my personal experience. The way you study Islam here, there was a critic that PISAI makes people Muslims. At a certain point, people were saying that if you study in PISAI, you become a Muslim. There is something true about that. You don't become a Muslim in the sense of belonging to the Ummah, to the community, and you will never make the Shahada. But it's not that. You become one of them in the sense that you understand, and the knowledge becomes something that you can relate with. So, what can be done really? It's a very difficult question to answer, but I think personally that we should aim at fostering more and more in our Catholic Church, in the Church of Jesus Christ, this approach of mission as being one with people. And Cardinal Lavigerie was one of the first and most important promoter of this mission in the 19th century that we have been going through. So there is no clear answer, but from a very personal and missionary approach and also spiritual approach, I think this is the way forward. We are not better than the others. but we have something unique we can share with the world.
With this, we come to the end of our conference.
I saw a handsome
Oh. So thank you very much, Father Serge, for this valuable historical insight, which has cast a new light on the origins of PISAI and on the missionaries of Africa's significant role in fostering Catholic-Muslim dialogue. We offer you a round of applause. Thank you. And then I give the last word to the president. Maybe he has some news for us for the centenary. I don't know.
Thank you very much for your presence. And it is the end of our year, or of our academic year. So I'm very happy that we are preparing our century. So in the 11th, 12th December, we will have our century. So at the Urbanian University, because our library is